My life was a relentless search, a quiet desperation masked by youthful ambition. Then, in the blink of an eye, everything I knew, everything I understood about existence, simply ceased to be. I was gone. Yet from that profound absence, I returned with an awareness that defied all logic, a lucidity that illuminated the very essence of pain and purpose in others. What truly happens when the world says you're gone, but you've never felt more intensely alive?
My life felt like a constant pursuit, yet I never quite caught what I was chasing. Each new path I explored eventually led to the same nagging question. Wasn't there something more than this endless cycle of searching and letting go? Before that night, my life felt like a collection of unfinished drafts, a constant search for a melody I could never quite hum. I was Mark, a college student, or at least that's what I told people. In truth, I was more of a professional wanderer, drifting through semesters, chasing fleeting interests, and leaving a trail of half-hearted commitments behind me. I lived in Fort Dodge, Iowa, a quiet, unassuming town nestled beside the Des Moines River, a place that felt both comforting and confining. My days were a mix of classes I barely attended, runs along the river road, my one true passion, running, and endless hours spent with my friends, debating the meaning of life over cheap pizza and late-night movies. Growing up, I was the kind of kid who was always restless, always looking for the next big thing. My childhood was fairly typical, filled with bike rides, scraped knees, and the comforting rhythm of small-town life. One vivid memory that often comes back to me is the endless summers I spent exploring the woods near my house, imagining myself an intrepid explorer charting unknown territories. There was a sense of boundless possibility then, a naive belief that the world was mine to conquer. But as I entered my college years, that bright spark began to dim. The structured world of academia felt stifling, and the grand dreams of my youth seemed to dissipate into a haze of indecision. I'd tried different majors, dabbled in various hobbies, but nothing truly stuck. Each new pursuit felt exciting for a brief period, only to quickly lose its luster, leaving me with a familiar sense of emptiness. It was like I was constantly building elaborate sandcastles, only for the tide to inevitably wash them away. Emotionally, I was adrift. There was no overwhelming sadness, no profound despair, but rather a persistent, low-grade hum of dissatisfaction. I was polite, friendly even, but beneath the surface, a quiet yearning pulsed, a longing for purpose, for something that would truly ignite my spirit. My everyday joys felt superficial, easily overshadowed by an undercurrent of anxiety about the future. I was searching, desperately, for a sense of direction that eluded me. I'd often stare at the stars at night, feeling infinitesimally small, wondering if there was something more, something I was missing. My relationship with life and death before all of this was indifferent, I suppose. I was raised Catholic, so there was a nominal belief in an afterlife, but it was largely theoretical, abstract. Death was something that happened to other people, a distant concept, not a personal reality. I never really contemplated my own mortality. I was too busy trying to figure out how to live, or rather, how to start living. The idea of a soul, of consciousness continuing beyond the body, was a vague notion I hadn't truly grappled with. I was a skeptic by nature, preferring tangible evidence to blind faith. Little did I know, all of that was about to be profoundly, violently, and irrevocably challenged.
The night seemed to envelop the road, smothering all movement and sound. Then, a strange unease settled over us, a chilling premonition that something profound, something irreversible, was about to unfold. August 3rd, 1986. That day began like countless others, a canvas of mundane routines painted with the faint hues of summer. The morning sun streamed through my bedroom window in Fort Dodge, awakening me to the familiar chirping of birds. There was a lightness in the air, a kind of quiet anticipation, not of dread, but of a new chapter. I had officially withdrawn from summer school at the University of Northern Iowa, a decision that felt both liberating and daunting. My immediate future was mapped out. I was joining the service, and my physical was scheduled for the very next day, after which I'd be flown off to training. It was a massive leap, a desperate attempt to find the structure and purpose that had eluded me for so long. My longtime friend, John, who had just gotten married the month before, came over. We spent the afternoon in a comfortable rhythm of domesticity, cooking hamburgers on the grill, the sizzling meat and smoky aroma filling the backyard, and watching movies on TV. We talked for hours about my upcoming departure, about the service, about the choices I was making to turn my life around. The conversation was easy, punctuated by laughter and the comfortable silence of old friends. Yet as the evening wore on, a subtle thread of uncertainty began to weave itself into the fabric of my resolve. Was this the right decision? Was I truly ready to leave everything behind? As midnight approached, the questions lingered, unresolved. "Let's just drive," I suggested, the idea of open roads and late-night talks appealing more than endless pacing. My father had lent me his car for the evening, a two-door Toyota sports car. It was smaller, lighter, more responsive than what I was used to, and I remember a fleeting thought about its nimbleness as I slid behind the wheel. We decided to take the River Road, a stretch of pavement I knew intimately from my countless training runs. It snaked along the Des Moines River, a familiar, almost sacred route for me. Just before 2 a.m., we began our descent down a large hill leading out into the countryside. The night was eerily calm, bathed in the soft glow of distant airport lights that shimmered through the darkness blanketing the horizon. "It's so peaceful out here," I remember saying, looking out over the river, the stars a scattered diamond dust across the sky. But then, a flicker of something unsettling. John shifted beside me, an uncharacteristic tension in his posture. He clicked his seatbelt into place.
A chill traced its way up my spine, a cold, prickling sensation that wasn't from the night air. It was a primal shiver, an internal alarm bell that rang with a faint, unsettling echo. I reached for my own seatbelt, my fingers brushing the buckle, but then, inexplicably, I hesitated. A fleeting moment of thought, a split-second decision, or perhaps a strange premonition I couldn't articulate, and I let it go. The feeling was like walking into a cold spot in a perfectly warm room, a sudden, inexplicable shift in the atmosphere. We continued our descent, still less than a mile from home, approaching a curve in the road that had recently been resurfaced. I instinctively braked, slowing down, but then the car jolted violently. We hit a dip, a subtle yet treacherous transition between the old and new pavement. The impact sent the car swaying, a sickening lurch that threw our momentum off balance. The front wheels veered onto the shoulder, and in an instant we were fishtailing across the road, the tires fighting for grip on what felt like ice. The world outside the windshield became a chaotic blur. Trees, previously still and silent sentinels, now danced grotesquely in the harsh glare of the headlights, like puppets on invisible strings. The road reflectors, normally mundane markers, suddenly radiated an almost ethereal brilliance, swaying back and forth like a conductor's lanterns, guiding us deeper into a terrifying symphony of metal and screeching tires. The darkness that had just enveloped the road was now pierced by the car's lights, transforming everything into a stark, almost heavenly whiteness, disorienting and surreal. My stomach churned with nausea, a sickening dread rising in my throat. This wasn't a familiar road anymore. It was a demented carnival ride, accelerating wildly, heading for an unknown destination. Would we ever stop? The thought screamed in my mind, a desperate silent plea. Every second stretched into an eternity, an unbearable tension building with each violent swing of the car. We were hurtling towards something, an unseen precipice, and the only question was when and where the ride would finally end.
The world outside saw a coma, but within, I found a realm of such profound beauty and peace that no earthly language could ever truly capture its magnificence. It was a symphony of feelings, a tapestry of sensations, woven from the very fabric of contentment, love, and joy. The car spun, a violent ballet of metal and glass, and then a sudden, impossible stillness. One moment my hands were gripped to the steering wheel, tendons straining, my stomach a knot of terror. The next, an inexplicable lightness. The physical world, with its jarring impacts and sickening lurches, simply faded. It wasn't a gradual transition, but an instantaneous severing, like a cord being cut. The excruciating pain that had begun to bloom in my body vanished, replaced by an astonishing sense of relief, a profound weightlessness. I felt myself rise, not physically, but as if my very essence levitated, detaching from the crumpled form in the driver's seat. From this new vantage point, I saw my hands still frozen in terror on the steering wheel, the tendons stark against the pale skin. It was a bizarre, almost comical sight, as if a puppet show was unfolding below me and I, the puppeteer, had simply floated away. My body, a mere vessel, seemed to recede into the background, a distant, unmoving object. The stars, which had moments before spun wildly through the windshield, now seemed to embrace me, pulling me upward into their celestial dance. I was airy, light-headed, and utterly at peace, a profound tranquility washing over me as I became lost in their shimmering embrace. The chaos, the fear, the physical agony, all of it was left behind, a forgotten echo in a world I no longer inhabited. This was the last I would remember of the physical accident itself. The shattering glass, the tearing metal, the impact that would break my neck and sever my ear, these brutal details were mercifully absent from my awareness. I was simply gone, carried away into a peaceful, star-dusted oblivion. Then I awoke, not to the harsh reality of a hospital room, but within myself, suspended in a vast, dark void. It was a shocking re-entry, a jarring combination of profound pain and disorienting confusion. I struggled desperately to open my eyes, but it was as if my eyelids had been sewn shut. Yet I was aware of light, a radiant glow that seemed to penetrate through my closed eyelids from far above, like the sun piercing the eyelids of someone napping on a beach. I looked up from deep within myself, and where my eyes should have been, I perceived what felt like keyholes in a door, with streams of light radiating through them, like a movie projector casting its beam into a darkened theater. A terrifying realization dawned. I was trapped. It felt as though I was submerged beneath a blanket of ice, a powerful, gentle current carrying me helplessly downstream. Panic flared. I thrashed, desperate to reach the surface, to breathe, to escape this suffocating nightmare. But the current was irresistible, its flow both powerful and strangely comforting. I was being pulled away, like an astronaut severed from their life-sustaining ship, drifting eternally into the cold, silent nothingness of space. Terror consumed me, a primal scream trapped within my silent self. I fought, I resisted. I waited for someone, anyone, to awaken me from this horrifying dream before I drifted too far to ever return. My family, their faces flashed through my mind, a desperate longing to call out to them, to tell them to awake me, but no sound escaped the confines of this isolating nightmare.
As the pain intensified, growing more agonizing and unbearable, it began to eclipse the confusion and terror. I realized the futility of my struggle to awaken, to fight against this unseen force. A new instinct took hold, escape the pain. I sought shelter, deep within my own being. I ceased my struggle, allowing the gentle current to carry me away, deeper and deeper within myself, towards an unknown safety. It was as if my physical mind and body, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the trauma, instinctively knew what to do. Like an electrical fuse box, my body released its protective circuit breaker, shielding my inner self, the very core of my being, from the unbearable overload. My physical body became an autopilot, enduring the pain and confusion, while my true self bailed out, parachuting to safety. I burrowed deep, like a person seeking refuge in a fruit cellar during a violent storm, closing the door behind me, huddling in darkness and silence, waiting for the tempest to pass. My physical body, left behind, became a hollow shell, an abandoned airplane hangar, dark and empty, with my consciousness suspended weightlessly within its core. My journey downward became a series of shelters, each one a temporary refuge where I could rest and gather strength. But the pain, a lurking shadow, would inevitably catch up, its tendrils penetrating the walls of my sanctuary, forcing me to retreat further, seeking the next, deeper haven. It was like a soldier retreating from the chaos of the front lines, seeking shelter in one foxhole after another, progressively moving farther from danger, closer to an elusive safety. Or a pedestrian running from one doorway to another during a sudden downpour, inching closer to the warmth of home. Then, a profound shift. I became passive, enveloped by a gentle current that carried me with an undeniable security. I no longer resisted its pull, no longer questioned where I was drifting. The urgency to breathe, the primal fear of suffocation, simply vanished. I realized it wasn't necessary. The panic, the struggle, the resistance, all ceased. Even the uncontrollable gagging and choking noises I had vaguely perceived from my physical body earlier were gone. The intensity with which I had fought to resist was now replaced by an overwhelming desire to simply be, to understand what was happening. I looked far above, and the light that had pierced my eyelids slowly, gracefully faded away. A profound warmth enveloped me, a feeling of security so absolute, so comforting, it was like being cradled in a mother's arms. Still carried by this gentle current, deep within my own being, I tried to rationalize. Where was I? How did I get here? Where was I going? No answers came, yet an immense sense of safety and security permeated my very core. The unbearable pain I had fled, the gentle isolation of the blackness, the inexplicable ability to exist without breathing, none of it made sense, yet it was undeniably real. For a moment, I thought I was simply home in bed, deep asleep. But the paradox lingered. How could I be awake, thinking, talking to myself, and yet asleep? Was this a dream? If so, why couldn't I awaken? A chilling thought then surfaced. Was I dead? But if so, why could I still feel, still think, still experience? A wave of sorrow washed over me, a pang of regret for the unfulfilled things, for leaving my loved ones without a proper goodbye. And then, the pain, that relentless shadow, found me again, forcing me to retreat even deeper within myself.
Finally, I reached my last and final shelter. I knew with an absolute certainty that I could go no deeper. I locked the door behind me, settling into the profound security of this ultimate refuge. This wasn't just another shelter. It was a fortress different from all the others. A calmness, a tranquility, far surpassing anything I had known before, permeated this space. The pain which I had so desperately sought to elude was utterly unable to penetrate its walls. It remained outside, like a fierce dog leashed to a tree, its bite unable to reach me.
I had shed all contact with my physical body, leaving only my inner self, the core of my being, to pass through the threshold of this fortress. My pain, my physical ties, remained far behind and above, tethered to the external world. I had removed them like a workman shedding soiled boots at the doorstep before entering the pristine cleanliness of home. Here, within this barrier, I was safe. I knew with an intuitive certainty that I would ride out the storm here. The fear, confusion, and pain that had defined my initial awakening dissipated completely, replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace, tranquility, and safety, unlike anything I had ever known. Despite the absolute silence of this refuge, I could hear, not with ears, but with an inner knowing, perceiving sounds and, more profoundly, the many feelings that emanated within this sanctuary. I was aware of absolute darkness, yet it never blinded me, never hindered my vision. There was nothing to see, yet I could see like never before, with a clarity that transcended sight. I remained alive here and never lonely. Something, someone, somewhere, an undeniable presence instilled me with this profound sense of well-being and security. I became utterly content, enveloped by the warmth that radiated within this refuge. All my questions, which had plagued me moments before, simply vanished. I had no answers, but I had no questions either. All constructs of time and order dissolved. I felt no hunger, no tiredness. All physical needs, all earthly drives were left behind, leaving only the mental self, pure consciousness, separated from the world far above. I had no rational explanation for where I was or how I got there, but the security and safety were absolute. It was like a dream, yet without mental illusion. Everything felt intensely real and conscious, unlike anything I had ever experienced in my waking life. I no longer cared about the where or what. I simply knew I was safe, and here I would remain, riding out the storm. Within this profound state, my consciousness expanded, becoming more alert, more vivid than any normal waking state. Thoughts didn't just occur, they exploded with incredible speed, a cascade of insights. Time itself ceased to exist. Everything seemed to happen at once, or perhaps time simply stopped, losing all meaning in this higher realm of consciousness. My senses, too, were incredibly more vivid, perceiving nuances and depths that were impossible in the physical world. I felt united, one with everything, a profound sense of harmony with the universe. It was an overwhelming flood of unconditional love, a boundless, all-encompassing joy that was the very foundation of existence.
And then the knowledge. It wasn't taught or explained in words, but simply imparted. I suddenly seemed to understand everything about the universe, its intricate workings, its purpose. It was a complete, instantaneous download of universal truths. My past, my entire life, flashed before me, not as a disjointed memory reel, but as a panoramic, empathetic review. I re-experienced every action, every word, every thought, from the perspective of myself and, critically, from the perspective of those I had impacted. There was no judgment, only pure understanding, a profound lesson in cause and effect, in the ripple of every choice. I saw how my actions, even the smallest ones, had affected others, and how their actions had affected me. It was a humbling, yet deeply enlightening process, revealing the interconnectedness of all things. I understood my purpose, the unique thread I was meant to weave into the tapestry of existence. Beyond my own life, I even glimpsed scenes from the world's future, fleeting yet impactful visions that hinted at coming events, though their specific details remained veiled in the grander context of universal patterns. It wasn't about prophecy, but about understanding the flow of energy, the unfolding of consciousness on a grand scale. And through it all, the presence, not a distinct being with a face or form, but a palpable, benevolent entity, a higher power that had guided me here, instilling me with well-being, reassuring me of my safety. It was a silent, telepathic communication, a knowing beyond words, a profound sense of being loved and protected. This was the culmination, the deepest truth, that love was the fundamental force, the very essence of reality, and that all existence was interconnected, a single, harmonious whole. There was no fear, no doubt, only an absolute, unwavering certainty of this profound truth.
Stepping back into consciousness was like a jolt, a jarring collision with the reality I had completely forgotten. The sheer physical discomfort, the weight of the body, was a stark and brutal contrast to the boundless peace I had just known. My serene fortress, my sanctuary of absolute knowing and profound peace, began to dissolve. It wasn't a violent expulsion, but a gentle yet firm nudge, as if an unseen hand was pushing me out of the nest. There was a faint recognition that it was time to go, a silent understanding imparted by the guiding presence that had enveloped me. As I mentally approached what felt like a hatch door securing my refuge, I hesitated, gathering a courage I hadn't realized I needed. I looked ahead, towards the front lines of the physical world I had escaped, a world that now seemed impossibly distant and chaotic. The first few steps back were brutally awakening. The sting of pain, which had been banished from my inner world, immediately asserted itself. It was an overwhelming re-entry, like a schoolboy stepping out of a warm house into a bitter snowstorm, the biting cold a shock to his system. The lightness, the freedom, the boundless joy of the refuge were abruptly replaced by an oppressive weight, a crushing sense of confinement. My body, which had been a distant, hollow shell, now became a heavy, aching prison. Every nerve ending screamed with the pain I could not have conceived of moments before. Nausea, a sickening disorientation swamped me. It was the shock of reanimation, the visceral realization that I was back, bound once more to a physical form that felt utterly alien and broken. I opened my eyes on a Wednesday, nearly 5 bewildering days after the accident. The world that greeted me was a blurry, distorted mosaic of bright lights and hushed voices. My first coherent thoughts were a torrent of bewildered questions. Where am I? What happened? But deeper, more profound was the sense of loss, a profound melancholy for the magnificent realm I had just left. The peace, the boundless love, the absolute understanding, it was all so vivid, yet slipping away like sand through my fingers. A wave of intense disappointment, almost anger, washed over me. Why was I back? Why was I pulled from that perfection? The contrast was almost unbearable. I tried to reconcile the two realities, the infinite conscious being I had been and this fragmented, suffering body. It felt like being crammed back into a tiny box after soaring through the cosmos. My physical state was dire. I was weak beyond imagining, every muscle aching, every joint protesting. My head throbbed, a relentless drumbeat of pain. I was disoriented, struggling to piece together even the most basic facts. I could hear tubes being suctioned from my lungs, the constant whir of a respirator doing the breathing for me. My neck was immobilized, my head held in what I would later learn were angel tongs, pulling my head away from my body with weights, a constant agonizing tension. I was lying on a kinetic bed that slowly rotated me from side to side, a strange, impersonal rocking that underscored my utter helplessness.
The reactions of those around me were a bewildering cacophony of fear, relief, and profound disbelief. Doctors and nurses, their faces etched with exhaustion, would lean in, their voices calm but firm, repeating the same stark message. You were in a car accident. You're paralyzed. You're a quadriplegic. You'll be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. Their words hung in the air, heavy and final, clashing violently with the boundless sense of freedom and wholeness I had just experienced. When I tried to express the aliveness I felt, the profound joy, the incredible peace that still lingered within me, their expressions hardened. They dismissed it gently but firmly as confusion, denial, or unrealistic optimism. They saw a broken body, a devastated future. They couldn't grasp that feeling alive was not a state of body, but of self. Their understanding was too tied to the material, the tangible, to comprehend the spiritual reality I had just encountered. My parents, their faces a mixture of agony and cautious hope, received different news than John's family. They had been told I was dead at the scene. To see me, 5 days later, conscious, if even barely, was a miracle to them. But the doctor's pronouncements overshadowed any immediate celebration. Their eyes held a deep, quiet terror for what my future held. In those first bewildering days and weeks, I struggled to share. I tried to articulate the light, the peace, the overwhelming love, the profound knowledge I had gained. But the words felt inadequate, clumsy, falling far short of the magnificent reality I had just experienced. My descriptions were met with sympathetic nods, worried glances, or outright bewilderment. Even my priest, when I later tried to explain it to him, seemed uncomfortable, rebuffing the experience as something perhaps not to be discussed openly. It was clear the world I had returned to was not ready for the truths I now held. My incredible journey had isolated me in a way nothing else could have. I had come back, but I had returned to a world that could not comprehend where I had been.
I returned to a world I once knew, but I was fundamentally transformed. The material ties that once bound me loosened, replaced by an inner compass that pointed towards something far more profound, a ceaseless urge to share the solace I had found, to help others navigate their own deep suffering. The safety and profound contentment of my refuge lingered within me, a constant wellspring in my waking state. It was an inner warmth that supplied my body with the necessary nutrients for life, a well that continuously grew and overflowed within me. This sustained presence allowed me to set aside the fear, pain, and confusion of my physical reality, redirecting my focus to the external world with a newfound clarity. I didn't know what the future held for me in this drastically altered physical form, but I did know with an absolute certainty that I was safe, and whatever awaited me I could accept and overcome. In the initial weeks and months of my recovery, as I began the grueling physical demands of therapy, I often seemed absent. I wasn't. I was simply clicking back into this new awareness, an intuitive state that I could now access even while conscious. My refuge wasn't just a memory, it was a living, breathing part of me, a deep internal resource. Each night as I lay in my hospital bed, I focused on a different area of my damaged body, concentrating on the warmth deep within me, becoming one with it. I focused on bypassing the damaged circuitry of my spinal cord, willing the warmth to flow through, filling every extremity with its life-giving energy. It was a profound act of self-healing, a spiritual intervention on a physical plane. I felt a tremendous sense of aliveness and constantly expressed the true joy I felt, much to the skepticism of doctors and nurses who labeled me confused, in denial, or possessing unrealistic optimism. They waited for my spirit to subside, for me to come to grips with my paralysis. But my spirit only grew stronger, empowered by an inner conviction they couldn't possibly fathom. They couldn't understand how I could feel so alive without the use of my body. For them, life was intrinsically tied to physical function. For me, being alive was a state of self, a truth they were too tethered to the material world to grasp. Then, 2 weeks after the cervical fusion surgery, while a nurse was conducting routine care, she noticed it, a toe on my right foot moving. Thinking it a spasm, she initially dismissed it, but another nurse saw it too and called the doctor, who was utterly astonished when I moved it on command. That tiny movement, born from an inner determination and a connection to a profound source of healing, was the first tangible proof of the impossible. And nearly 5 months of prayers, relentless hard work, and unwavering faith later, on December 12th, I walked out of Iowa Methodist Medical Center using only a cane. It was nothing short of a miracle.
The return to walking was only the most visible sign of an internal revolution. My NDE irrevocably changed everything. The superficial interests and aimless wandering that had defined my life before the accident were stripped away like dead leaves from a tree. Priorities shifted with the force of an earthquake. The pursuit of fleeting excitement, of external validation, suddenly seemed hollow. What I ceased to value were material possessions, social status, and the constant striving for things that ultimately held no meaning beyond this earthly plane. What I gained, however, was immeasurable. A profound appreciation for the simple act of breathing, for genuine human connection, for the inherent sanctity of life itself. My relationships became fewer but deeper. I socialized less in the conventional sense, preferring profound connection over casual acquaintance. My time is now largely spent with family and in quiet introspection, continually reflecting on the experience that shaped me. A journey I'm still trying to fully comprehend. Writing and journaling became and remain essential tools for processing these ongoing revelations. My worldview underwent a complete metamorphosis. Before, my Catholicism was moderate, a framework of beliefs passed down, largely theoretical. After, it evolved into something deeply spiritual, profoundly personal. The existence of God, or a higher power, became an undeniable, lived reality. It wasn't about dogma or ritual anymore, but about the palpable sense of unconditional love and interconnectedness I had experienced. Death was no longer an abstract end, but a transition, a natural continuation of consciousness. The soul, my true self, was not just a concept, but the eternal core of my being, separate from the physical body, yet capable of profound influence on it. The NDE provided concrete evidence that our existence is far grander, far more purposeful than we often perceive. My philosophy now centers on the understanding that love is the fundamental force of the universe, that every action has a ripple effect, and that our purpose lies in embodying that love and contributing to the universal harmony. With this radical shift came a profound sense of mission, an almost compulsive urge to alleviate the pain of others. I realized that the new awareness I came back with, this almost intuitive ability to see the pain and suffering inside people, was a gift meant to be shared. My purpose became clear: to help others deal with their pain by sharing my story of faith and life after death, offering solace and comfort in their grief or despair. It's a quiet ministry, often one-on-one, a gentle offering of hope in the face of loss. I haven't changed my profession in the traditional sense, but my life's work is now undeniably rooted in this profound calling.
Integrating this extraordinary experience into ordinary life, however, has not been without its challenges. The primary difficulty has been the widespread incomprehension. At first, I kept the experience mostly to myself, sharing it only with those I deeply trusted. Many people simply don't know what to make of it.
Their disbelief, their attempts to rationalize it away, or their uncomfortable silence can be isolating. When I returned to college over a year later, I finally put my experience into words in a paper titled Code Blue, A New Beginning. It was through my instructor that I first learned the term near-death experience and was astonished to discover that others had similar encounters. This validation was immense. Yet it also taught me the importance of tailoring my sharing to the audience, understanding that not everyone is prepared to discuss such profound phenomena. The existential crisis wasn't about the reality of the experience, but about how to live in a world that largely operates on a different reality. How do you explain the boundless love of the cosmos to someone who only understands the love of another human? It's a continuous process of navigating two distinct planes of existence. The journey from that dark stretch of River Road in 1986 to today has been nothing short of a rebirth. The NDE was not just an event, it was the crucible in which a new me was forged. Each night, a part of the experience still comes back to me in dreams, a constant, gentle reminder of the truths I glimpsed. It's a continuous process of integrating, understanding, and living by those revelations. My message is simple yet profound. We are more than our physical bodies, and love is the eternal current that connects us all. Death is not an end, but a doorway. The pain and suffering we experience in this life are real, but they are also part of a larger, purposeful tapestry. We carry within us an inner refuge, a well of boundless peace and warmth, always accessible, always ready to sustain us. This knowledge has instilled in me a deep sense of contentment and joy, an unwavering inner peace that no earthly circumstance can truly shatter. So whatever challenges you face, whatever grief you carry, remember this: there is a profound, loving intelligence at the heart of existence. You are connected to it, you are part of it, and you are never truly alone. The light you seek, the peace you yearn for, is already within you, waiting to be rediscovered. May this story offer a flicker of that light, a spark of hope, and an enduring sense of comfort in the knowledge that beyond this life there is an unimaginable peace, and within this life there is an undeniable purpose.